The lectern back?
I don't know. Do you? Would you like the lectern?
No, we took it out.
Okay.
Because people can't see the screen.
Oh. No, I don't need it.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yay! Let's get your attention.
Welcome to the 11th after party.
Yes.
Yeah. That means next month is the completes 1 year of the after party, which we began because about a year ago people were saying that the Tea Party's over, the Tea Party's over, and I'm not big on arguing and confrontation. So I thought, you know, well, why fight it? The Tea Party's over. Let's go to the after party. And so the idea of the after party was to, number one, get together and meet. We do a lot of virtual things, right? We use Twitter and emails and blogs and Facebook and all kinds of tools to stay connected and to meet people. But we are ultimately a community, and communities have to gather. That's really how you become a community. So we thought we'd visit different establishments around the greater St. Louis area every month on the third Thursday of the month, and have a brief meeting, have some information, maybe have some actions that you can go out and perform between this meeting and the next one, and then get back together and talk again. At the same time, it gives us a chance to let the people who think we're crazy feel better having judged me so well. But no, it's a chance to go out in the community where it's not sign waving and perhaps threatening to some people. It's kind of a normal thing that normal organizations and normal people do, and give you an opportunity to invite people to come spend a tea party evening in a fairly low risk normal environment, and people who are politically not politically active, but maybe share quite a few beliefs in limited government and fiscal responsibility and reasonably strong defense to prevent people from attacking us. Maybe they'll create a connection with us, and we'll create a connection with them, and grow the base a little bit. That was the whole idea of this, and it's been fairly successful. We started off with planning to do it for 1 year, and I think we're going to move into a second year. And to that point, up at the front desk is our little cards with our future events, with the location, the date, and the topic. If you'd like to grab some of those on your way out, distribute them, hold on to them so you know where we are. But next month, the 12th of the first set of 12, and there's going to be a very special memento to commemorate the full year. That will be in West County at Sky Music Lounge on Kerrs Mill Road in Baldwin, which is a fantastic venue, by the way. And it's a really cool place to get to know if you've never been there on Friday and Saturday, maybe Sunday. I'm not sure. They have outstanding local music in an environment that's perfect for music. It's all music, if you like that, and a big variety. So that's the Tea Party. Mark it down, August 16th, 7 o'clock, Sky Music Lounge, Baldwin, Missouri. The subject is election board and voter fraud. And who is the speaker? I can cover the voter fraud because I've been doing that for years, but we'll have. I'm not sure who's going to talk. Just grew up in the city.
Are you teasing Frida?
I am.
Frida, he's pulling your leg.
I don't. It's okay.
She knows that I'm good at voter fraud.
You mean actually doing it? Doing it or preventing it?
I grew up down the street from Francis Slay. Of course.
Vote early, vote often.
Exactly.
Vote again on afternoon.
Poll workers need it. I think St. Louis County alone needs 3,500
Pretty close to that.
for August 7th primary, and by the way, while we're on the topic, the primary is August 7th. If you would like to volunteer today, and it's going to be the last, we're not doing primaries anymore. It's the form to fill out to be a poll worker is there. And I'll just give you one reason to be a poll worker. If they, in many areas of St. Louis County, Jefferson County, there are not enough Republicans to have a Republican at each poll, as they're required to be. So they ask a Democrat, would you like to be a Republican for a day and represent the interests of the Republican Party to prevent voter fraud? And believe it or not, they actually get volunteers to do that. Some community-minded Democrat raises his hand and takes the oath to be a Republican for a day.
How noble.
Yeah, it's very noble.
So that's, if there's no other reason to work the polls, there's a big one. You might be able to actually prevent voter fraud. Which brings us to tonight's main topic, education. Unless you want a whole generation of people like me, you're going to have to do something about education. So we've invited our two, the StLouisTeaParty.com website has, it actually just pulls in feeds from a variety of bloggers in the St. Louis area, primarily not big names because they get exposure through other means. We try to bring in the people who are really doing the work, who are excellent writers, and introduce them and make them big famous names across the area and across the country. And since the beginning of that, the Missouri Education Watchdog has been a blog that's contributed fantastic content and kept Missouri voters informed about what's going on, what the dangers are, what the opportunities are in education. Tonight we have Gretchen Logue and Ann Gassel of Missouri Education Watchdog to talk about the things that will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up about education, and they really will, because what people decide is important and how they decide to resolve those important issues for the rest of our lives is being taught in classrooms right now. And there's almost nothing we can do outside of education and entertainment to influence that generation of people. And remember, from the last election to this election, I believe 18 million new voters reached election age from 2008 to now. Think about that. Every 4 years, that's how much growth there is, and that's not even counting the 20 million illegal aliens that Obama invited in to vote. This is just a natural progression of the population. That's why education is important, and frankly, so is entertainment and the culture in general. But Gretchen and Ann, you have the stage for the rest of the night. Thank you.
I'm Ann Gassel, and I call myself the junior co-editor of Missouri Education Watchdog. Gretchen started this about 3 years ago, and she really has done a phenomenal amount of work on the blog, and I kind of sub in on a few days and help get the word out. I am a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids in the high school in the Rockwood School District, and so I'm interested in education. I thought being on the PTO and going to school meetings was being an active, involved parent, and I've since discovered, boy, I was totally wrong on that. So, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Harry Potter franchise. If you are, you recognize Professor Snape here, so starting off an education talk with a professor. Our country seems to be enamored of magic. You talk about the entertainment industry. Well, this entire franchise was huge because everybody wants to believe in magic, and I think there are people out there right now who really do believe in magic, do believe magic will happen in education. They have the silver bullet to fix it. There is some bit of magic. There's 4 words. It's a magic spell. It opens amazing doors and accomplishes almost anything. Those 4 words, it's for the children. You use those 4 words and you can do anything. But tonight, We're going to talk about education. Hopefully we're going to talk about some of the things you don't know about education. The outlook for education, I think everybody is pretty clear. It's kind of grim. We see something really awful on the horizon. But the other thing we know about icebergs is the worst part of them is what's underneath the surface. There's things that are not as obvious to everybody, and they are much bigger issues. So tonight we're going to talk about those things that are under the surface that people don't know, and we're going to try and give you some action items, because it's one thing to come and hear the terrible state of things, but you hate to walk away not knowing what you can do about it. So we do have some action items that you guys can take on when you're done. One of the things we need to keep asking, whether it's healthcare or education, is, does this reduce federal spending? Does this reduce federal control? Right now, the big issue in education is control. And though we write about issues in Missouri for education, everything is coming out of Washington, so really a lot of the things we write about are national issues for education. You know, the Department of Education was created in 1978 under President Jimmy Carter, and it was specifically forbidden to create national standards. At least at that point, they recognized some bit of state sovereignty. Since then, there's been a shrinking control in local control of education. But it started actually even before Carter, back in '65, when they did the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That told the states, kind of on a very general level, what they needed to do and provide in education. And that was augmented in 1989 with Title I for students with disabilities. Of course, the category of disabilities keeps getting expanded, so that continues to grow. And then finally in 2001, the lovely No Child Left Behind. It seems every time they want to get involved more in the federal government with education, they keep making it worse. Finally, in 2009, when the pending doom of No Child Left Behind was hitting us, Congress gave the Department of Education $4.3 billion and said, fix it. No instructions how to fix it, just said, go ahead and do it, fix it. So the first thing the Department of Education did was give $362 million to establish 2 assessment consortia, the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortia, this SBAC, and the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career, which was called the PARC Consortia. So what are the consortia for? Well, they were to develop assessments, tests, that the states would use to measure whether or not they are learning the necessary material. Now, what do you do when you have a test? If you're going to design a test, what's the first thing you have to know? Well, what are you going to test? What do you need people to know? So you must create the standard first in which you are going to measure the test. So even though the Department of Education created the consortia to develop assessments, this was their backdoor method of creating national standards, which they're calling the Common Core State Standards. And this is a little chart that kind of tells you where this came from. Arne Duncan, don't let him fool you, he's not that smart. This was not his idea. This came from quite an interesting group of people. There's the National Governors Association, the Council for Chief State School Officers, the Council for PTA, the National Association of School Boards, State Boards of Education. We're all involved in promoting this. This is where Arne Duncan gets away with saying it's a state-led initiative. However, if you'll notice on the bottom of this chart, with the arrows going up, funding to all of these groups involved came from the Gates Foundation. This is just a little background to say that the Federal Department of Education has decided that education is a business. And it's a great way to get money, and so they're turning it over to the businesses to really run education. There's some other names in here that I want you to remember for later. EPIC is the Electronic Policy Improvement Center, and David Coleman was in charge of that. You're going to hear his name a little bit later. The Hunt Institute, this is a George Soros-funded foundation. America's Choice was eventually bought out by Pearson, which is the largest textbook publisher in the world. So you can see a lot of people had a vested interest in developing the Common Core standards. So the SBAC Consortia, there's 27 states. It consists of governing states and advising states. Missouri is a governing state, but one of 22 out of the 27. The only difference between the governing and the advisory ones is they get to vote on policy and participate in work groups. The standards themselves have been developed, but nobody's seen them yet. They're untested, unproven, and unfunded. They may be good, and I'm all for improved standards, but we don't know, and we're diving in head first because math and language arts are going online in 2014. The assessments are copyrighted by the consortia, which means we pay to use them. They will be given to the students approximately every 3 weeks. This is kind of like the MAP test. Are you all familiar with the MAP test? on steroids. Okay, all the stress that goes into it, this is a test that is not developed by the teacher, not given by the teacher, it's given on a computer, not graded by the teacher, not reviewed by the teacher. The teacher will get a report afterwards saying where the students are behind, deficient, where they need to be. But their teacher evaluation will be tied to the student's performance on these assessments. And if we find something in Missouri that we don't like in the assessments, that we don't think is right, we have to convince 26 other states that it has to be changed. Yang Zhao is an internationally known scholar, author, and speaker on the topic of education technology, and I really like what he has to say. His view of the Common Core is this: the Common Core will not make your children ready for college or a career. The future needs passionate, creative, collaborative innovators and entrepreneurs, not compliant, uniform test takers. And that is what Common Core will give us, compliant, uniform test takers. The Common Core will not help the disadvantaged children to do better either, because the real problem is poverty, not standards in the classroom. So how did we get Common Core standards? Well, back in 2009, there was this race to the top competition among the states where they could apply for grant money from the Department of Education. The Department of Education put the applications out at the beginning of December and had to have them back completed by January 20th. It was an incredibly short time frame. In the application, the states had to agree to adopt the Common Core standards. DESE, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Missouri, required the district superintendents who wanted Race to the Top money to sign a memorandum of understanding stating that they would comply with everything in the grant application, even though the grant application hadn't yet been written. So they signed a blind MOU saying they would agree to it. In addition, DESE committed the state to adopting everything in the grant application, even if we didn't get the award, which we didn't. So can we just back out of Common Core standards? Well, no, the way the consortia are designed, you can only not drop out by providing written notice of the statutory or policy reason that you want to exit. Then you have to get all of the states on the consortia to approve your exit. And finally, the Department of Education has to approve your exit. So the question is, where's the local control? So what can you do? Well, several states have recognized the problem with Common Core standards and the fact that they have no control over it. So Utah and South Carolina are kind of spearheading the way, and they are developing petitions to get their state out of Common Core. We're going to put a petition up on the Missouri Education Watchdog blog and try and get people to sign it. We're also looking for people who can help take that into Jefferson City, because part of getting us out of Common Core will be that statutory or policy language, and the petition can help us get that so that we can hopefully get out of Common Core. We also need to demand that the legislature hold DESE accountable for their failure to seek legislative approval when changing the curriculum. They are required by the Missouri Constitution to get legislative approval, and they did not do this when they did this grant application for Common Core. Now you notice I didn't say what you can do. Go to your school board and tell them you don't want Common Core. Your school board doesn't really have a whole lot of authority to decide this. Now, how many of you have been to a school board meeting in your area? Okay. Have any of you noticed the decisions seem to be consistently unanimous? Have anybody noticed there's very little public comment allowed? This is not accidental, and I've seen wonderful people go into the school board and come out the Stepford wife kind of person who suddenly votes in unison with everybody else. And part of that is because they are counseled by the Missouri Association of School Boards on how to run a school board meeting. They are not supposed to show dissent in front of the public, so a lot of these things are worked out behind closed doors. And if you allow too much public input, it creates an emotional charged issue, and so they kind of try and keep public input to a minimum. But they're also in a tough position because they have very little latitude to do things. They are dictated by the state in terms of which high-stakes tests they give and when, and they're told by DESE, who in turn is told by the Department of Education which areas are the most concerned. One of the things you're going to see all the time if you read about education is we have to close the achievement gap. That means we have to take our lowest performers and bring them up closer to our highest performers. Generally speaking, that has meant we throw everything, all of our resources, at the lowest performers, and we're allowing our top and brightest kids to languish at the top. The local school boards have lost control over the high-stakes testing. They've lost control over this teacher evaluation process, and this just happened recently. Now, we haven't gotten any of the Race to the Top grant awards, so we were kind of stuck facing No Child Left Behind requirements. So DESE applied for a waiver and announced proudly that they got the waiver. But of course, there's all kinds of things we had to sign on to in the waiver. And one of them is that now our teachers, 50% of their evaluation will be based on the students' test scores on these assessments that the teacher, as I said, doesn't write, doesn't grade, doesn't review with the kids. So I have to share a little anecdote. There's a teacher in New York. She's an 8th grade math teacher. Her 8th grade students do 10th grade math work. When they took the state test, when they take the state standardized test in New York, they score in the 98th to 99th percentile in math. She recently got her performance back and found out that she was rated the worst math teacher in all of New York City because her students did not improve from 98% to above.
Yes.
So, you know, we like to make these things very objective and use numbers, but the numbers can be used against us. And when she went to her principal, she said, you know, this isn't going to hurt me, is it? And he said, oh, no, I'm sure it will be fine. Well, she saw the writing on the wall that she was going to have to deal with this all the time. Unfortunately, now New York lost a really wonderful math teacher because she was not willing to stay in a system that was going to determine her a failure. We've lost control of our curriculum. The Common Core assessments, when you take them, say, it's okay, you can teach your own things. You got 15% additional material that you can teach. Just remember that that means 9 minutes out of every hour. You can teach something else that you think would be, you know, a more well-rounded curriculum. The other thing that we've lost is the post-secondary student goals. Now, these are the kids that go on to college. I'm sure if you've heard the president talk, if you've heard Arnie Duncan talk, we have to get more kids into college. We want more kids to go to college. This is the, you know, the wave of the future. There's only so many things a school board can do to get more kids into college. Now, in my particular district, which is Rockwood, one of the things they can do is they can drop class ranking. That helps. Class rank hurts the kids who are in the middle to lower third of the rank. So when a college gets them, well, they don't have the rank, so it doesn't hurt them quite so much. Now, the other side of that are top tested kids, the kids who are taking the AP courses. Normally, AP courses are a 1 to 5 scale, so they get a little bonus point for the rigor of that program. It's really a tougher program. When Mizzou now gets a transcript from my district, they will pull it out of the pile for anybody from Rockwood. And the first group of kids, they'll go through and they'll find their cut point, class rank, and scores, and those kids will get scholarship money. Then they will go to this secondary group that my kids would now be in. They will be stripped of all of their AP numbers, so they will be back to the 1 to 4 scale. And since they don't have class rank, Mizzou develops their own formula to estimate class rank. That means that those kids who have worked really hard, who have the rigor to pass college courses, will now be lower levels of, in terms of receiving scholarship money. So who are we benefiting? We're putting some of our most questionable kids into college at the expense of some of our really best kids. I can't go back to my school board and say, this is a terrible decision, you need to change it, because they needed it to reach the AYP, the average yearly progress requirements for getting a higher percentage of kids into college.
And that's tied to funding.
And that's all tied to funding, right? They need the AYP because their funding is tied to that. And it's as bad as this. Gretchen sat in a meeting with the Kirkwood superintendent who simply sat back and said, I just do what DESE tells me to do. Now, all of this education, all the reform and all the programs that they're doing, definitely...
How much are we paying him for that?
He is
Many money.
he is the highest paid superintendent in the state of Missouri. He has 5,000 kids in the district. He makes $284,000. And that was what he told me. I just do whatever DESE tells me to do.
Does he use a gun?
I don't know.
So there is an associated cost with this, and it is becoming quite huge. I don't know if you all have... This chart's been around for a little while. This is the Cato Institute. The red, green, and purple lines there at the bottom, the nice flat ones, those are our test scores since 1970, nice and flat. Blue line is the federal spending for education. You can see that's kind of like Al Gore's hockey stick there. But you notice it's not really having any effect on the bottom lines. Money is not the answer. All the people who tell you we need to invest in education, we need to spend for our kids' future, money is not the answer, and we in Missouri have the perfect example of that because we spent close to $2 billion on a single district in Kansas City in the 90s, and we accomplished nothing. There was no change in their scores. So money is not the answer to education, but it is going to cost us. The Virginia Department of Education did a study of what the compliance with No Child Left Behind was. And they determined that for a district to comply with No Child Left Behind, with just the training that they needed to put everybody through, the money they spent on that training, they instead could have hired 4 principals and 72 teachers. Those were teachers and principals that weren't there directly dealing with those kids and improving their education. They also, with all of this, because the government wants to be good stewards of your money, wants to prove to you that they've done a good job, they have all kinds of data collection and reporting requirements, which means now you have to have a full IT staff just to collect all this, manage it, and get all the reports in on time. Again, that's money not spent directly on education. Now, in 2009, when we applied for the Race to the Top funding, we could have gotten $250 million. That was the award that was available. DESE, like as I said, has gone and instituted everything that was in the grant application without receiving the money, and they didn't get any legislative approval for this funding as well. Now, the cost to Missouri for what they signed on to in that Race to the Top grant application was between $350 and $400 million. Chris Nicastro, who's the chair of the state Board of Education, estimated it was $389 million. And Pioneer Institute did a study, and they estimated it's about $350 million for a district or a state our size. There's now been, this year, a second round of Race to the Top grant competitions, a $60 million award for early childhood assessments. I don't know how you assess that a 3-year-old is going to really succeed in school, but apparently it takes a lot of people because they're going to use the Departments of Mental Health, Department of Health and Social Services, DESE, and the Coordinating Board for the early childhood. Now, when this was being written, finally somebody keyed in, and 34 senators went to DESE and the governor and said, don't submit this application. DESE did anyway, and as they did before, they promised to implement everything that was in the grant, even if they didn't receive the award, which they didn't. The pilot programs for all of these early childhood programs start in 64 districts this fall, without any approved funding. So what is that funding? Year 1 of the pilot program is $406 million. The full complete program for early childhood assessment is $1.6 billion. Now, you guys may remember at the end of the last legislative cycle, we had a $750 million gap in our budget. That 750 did not include the 389 for Common Core or the 406 for the early childhood, or certainly any forecasting for the rest of that 1.6 billion. In addition, DESE predicts that by the end of this year, they will be $900 million in the red.
Shocker.
So, what can you do? Well, DESE needs to be held accountable for the changes in curriculum. You need to talk to your legislators. They have got to make DESE fiscally accountable. We're looking at possibly seeing if we can get the state auditing office to look at what will really be the cost of these programs, and so that the fiscal nightmare that's approaching us underneath the surface of the water is much more obvious. And then talk to your legislator and school board about resisting the temptation to accept federal funds that comes with strings attached. And this time I did put your school board in there because the third round of Race to the Top funding is now out for applications, and this goes directly to the districts. Now, with everybody scrambling for money, the districts are looking for anywhere they can get money, and there's going to be great temptation to submit an application and get the money from the Department of Education. But it will come with all kinds of strings and all kinds of control. So again, the question they need to always be answering, how does this reduce federal spending and federal control? Now, there's a lot of people say, oh, well, heck with the public school system, it's a mess, and I don't want my kids to experience the liberal education they're going to get there. I'll homeschool them, or I'll take them into a private school. But you have the same problem there. You have funding. If your private school takes reduced lunch funding, or even some state funding that comes mixed with federal funding, they're going to be held to the same requirements as all of the public schools. The charter schools are going to be in the exact same boat. So in essence, when we tell our parents you have a choice, you can go to the public school or the charter school, it's the same thing in a different building. Homeschoolers, if you take an online course, and if you get any subsidy for the fees for that online course, you are become enrolled in that whole public system. And the last thing is, remember I mentioned David Coleman was there in the American Choice Foundation, EPIC. And he is the guy who really is spearheading the whole Common Core standards. Now he also apparently just got named the CEO of the SAT. So you better believe the SATs are now going to start looking a lot like the Common Core. So if you're homeschooling your kid and you're not teaching them the Common Core, they're going to have a hard time passing the SAT, and that is the gatekeeper to their college education. Oh, and one more thing. Data collection and privacy. Now, every state has a way to collect data on the students. That's how they figure out where the holes are, what they need to fix, what subgroup is having trouble. But that's always been information that the state has used. Well, now with the Common Core standards, a big component of it is what they call the longitudinal database. This collects 350 data points on each student, and the data is shared among the states. And it ultimately will track students from birth to their first job. And I know I sound like I'm wearing the tinfoil hat here, but this really is the plan. Because education to the Department of Education now is about creating the workforce for tomorrow. Watch when you read in articles how many times it says workforce, creating the workforce, the global worker. It's all about a workforce. It's not about educating the next generation. Now, okay, so you collect 350 data points, but there's things in there like family income, eye color, blood tests, and religious affiliation. Now, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with education, but it may have something to do with the job market. And the Department of Education recently changed the FERPA rules. The FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. They changed the rules to allow this data from the longitudinal database to be shared among the Departments of Health and Human Services, Labor, Corrections, private researchers, and other vendors approved by the DOE, and they did not get legislative approval when they made this change. So your kids' religious affiliation, political affiliation, the family's political affiliation, this will all be in data that is shared among all kinds of government departments. Children will be judged on that data, which is invasive, it may be faulty, good luck getting it changed, and the data tracking will be used by businesses to find workers, not the other way around. What can you do? Well, if you're a sci-fi geek like me, you can Gandalf this one and just say no and be the keeper of the data for your kids. FERPA's not really going to protect you the way it's currently written. So we have tonight an opt-out form that we suggest people submit to their school instead. And it says, this is the only information you may collect on my child. It's not foolproof, but it's a heck of a lot better than the FERPA that's there now. And I guarantee you, most people, because if you've had kids in the school system a while, you get the same forums every year, and you do the same thing with them. You don't read them because it's just some big gobbledygook. So a lot of what was just changed is going to go through, and people will sign all that data over without knowing about it. So just a quick review. Sign the petition to stop Missouri from implementing the Common Core standards. Demand that DESE is held accountable, both fiscally and for what they did to the curriculum. Talk to your legislator and school board about not accepting federal funds, and use the FERPA opt-out form for your child or grandchild. Do you guys have some questions?
What's the real solution?
Well, I'm an Ayn Rand person myself, so I think we need a separate system. I don't think we'll change the public system. I honestly don't. It's a giant, it is the Titanic heading for that iceberg. I think we need to load people into lifeboats. That's why I think it's very important to watch when they try and close a door on homeschoolers or on private schools. I know recently, with St. Louis losing its accreditation, the Archdiocese was ready to step in and accept a lot of students from those unaccredited schools. However, in doing so, they would have had to take the state funds, which would have obligated them to all of the state curriculum. And we talked to them and said, you really better think about this before you do this.
So what do we do? Where should children go to be educated outside of this?
My gut feeling is I don't think anything's going to change until parents walk away from the schools and take the funding with them. It's going to be hard, but as long as you have a centralized Department of Education, a federal program dictating how your schools are going to operate, I just don't see that there's going to be much way around it.
Jim?
Hey, I know Bill Randalls has made quite a few statements about declining federal funds. Has Dave Spence said anything about that? I've never heard him address that. You know what his position is?
Yeah, and Bill also would like to get rid of the State Board of Education. He said, we don't need it. We have all of our local school boards there, and we have teachers that are trained to teach. Let's let them do what they were trained to do.
Is your information available online somewhere?
We have cards.
Yeah,
Well, we could even put that on
can we get that on Tea Party?
Tea Party?
I don't know.
the PowerPoint.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I would like to get that.
We'll get it. And if you go to stlouisteaparty.com, you'll see there. Well, first of all, you can sign up for the daily email. Okay, so any of their links will take you there to the forums. But we'll get the PowerPoint up on SlideShare or something.
Yeah, I'd like to send that to my brother.
Okay, good.
I just wondered how the teachers' unions kind of fit into all of this. I'm sure they do, but is there some kind of special little...
Well, it's really quite interesting. The teachers in the teachers' unions themselves are very upset with the Obama administration because the Obama administration is pushing through all of this teacher assessment, that sort of thing.
taking control away from
Yes.
them as the individual
The teachers' union, however, the American Federation for Teachers, they just spent $10 million investing in Pearson or one of the assessment companies. So they see the writing on the wall. So basically what they're doing is hanging their teachers out to dry. If you listen to the education reformers, they say teachers and teacher unions, that's the reason the schools are failing. The teachers unions have too much power. And that's what we're all about. Now, part of that is true. But if you look at the other side, and you look at the past of how education has been the last 4 decades, to me, one of the big reasons it's failing is because there has been no real local control. Everything, all these people are dancing around like little puppets trying to fulfill all these federal mandates. I mean, the thing with No Child Left Behind, by 2014, 100% of children were supposed to be proficient in reading. Now, that's ludicrous. That's just not going to happen because there's some kids that just can't read. So if a school is having to try and do these goals that are unattainable, they are going to fail. So what they've done is they've set these schools and these teachers up for failure. So there are two sides. I would say probably the rank and file of the teachers are not real happy with the unions right now.
Nor are they qualified. We should test the teachers to start out with.
Well, we need better teachers, that's for sure.
Just test them. What if we got the ones that don't know how to read and write?
Definitely.
Decision makers at DESE, how many are they? It sounds like they might be real targets for trying to persuade them to think before they apply for these grants and,
Well, the problem with DESE, Chris Nicastro, one of the big problems that we have in this state, which I would like to see changed, we have an appointed commissioner, Chris Nicastro, she's appointed by the governor, and then our state school board members, there are 8 of them, they're also appointed. So the only person that we elect that is controlling all of this is the governor. So what...
those 8 people are the decision makers for the whole.
And DESE, yeah.
You said Missouri's in a group with 26 other states. Can Missouri voluntarily opt out, or once they volunteer, are they locked in?
That's where they said we have to get the statutory language in place in order to be able to get out. And it's a process. It will not be easy to get out, but without getting that either a policy language or statutory language in place, they're just going to say, no, you're in.
Would it help if Mitt Romney appointed the next Secretary of Education.
As long as their job was to close the office down.
Don't worry, we got that.
Which one of our Republican candidates for governor understands this issue and is willing to do something?
I think Bill Randalls has come out and said that he would abolish the Department of Education and turn down federal funding.
So do we need to get to him?
I think he actually has a pretty good grasp of the picture,
Yeah.
the big picture.
Even though Spence is working in the schools, or his wife is working with the schools to improve them, he doesn't. You don't think he gets it? I'm sure. I didn't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question, since you're not being put on the spot. Okay, so let's say whoever is elected governor decides to abolish this appointed board and the state group. So would DESE have a whole lot of effectiveness in controlling however many local school boards there are versus curriculum if there's no central, I mean, if we break the chain of command, doesn't that make their job infinitely more difficult?
They shouldn't need to be everywhere they're trying to
Well,
be.
I appreciate that, but you're talking about a petition, which is lots and lots of signatures, and you're talking about getting legislators on board, which I've never tried to do, so I don't know if that's an easy process or a difficult process.
Slam dunk.
Yeah. So it just seems like, well, is it easier to just work with one guy who seems to understand the problem and try to get him elected on this promise that he's going to dissolve this school, this state board of education, with the idea that then DESE doesn't really, I mean, you know.
Well, we would still be in Common Core, even if we had DESE. If we had DESE decimated, we would still be in Common Core.
Okay.
We would have to work it legislatively, from the legislator approach, changing the statute.
Right, but what's to say that the statute's going to be enforced? I mean, we're talking about DESE, and they're not being held accountable. So how is Common Core going to hold however many school districts there are in the state of Missouri accountable?
Federal money.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Yes. And if you talk to your teachers, or your kids talk to their teachers, now, I guarantee you, they will all tell you, they have been in professional workshops and training sessions with, and everybody's, oh, Common Core is coming, and it's so wonderful. So it's already there for them. Do you have a question?
Yes. I've heard the names, the Department of Education, ever since Ronald Reagan made a campaign promise to get rid of it. But I've never heard anyone say what the department does. What do they do?
They were supposed to be a clearinghouse of information so that if you had a really good curriculum or a really good program, you could share it with everybody else through the Department of Education. That was sort of the original intent. And they would collect some sort of general data to see who's doing good and, you know, could provide models for other people. But they were specifically forbidden from writing national standards.
Uh-huh. And did they do what they were forbidden to do?
Yes.
Yes. Almost immediately.
Yes.
Who objected at the time?
Not very many politicians. And I think that's something that is of a concern to me, is that when you start looking at this stuff, there's a great video on YouTube from 1989, and it's Lamar Alexander, and he was talking to the National Governors Association, and he was laying out a lot of what you heard tonight. And he's a Republican. So when you hear that this is all Obama, it really isn't. This has been a bipartisan plan for decades. Yeah.
One real quick point. The Department of Education was made a cabinet-level department by Carter, but it was created 100 years earlier, in 1863, with as a war measure to educate out the ideas that don't promote whoever decided it should be. So it was created as a way to control the ideas of the people and educate the rebellion out of people. That was its purpose. It has taken that all the way through up until now. And so it's been following. It was in the Morrill Act.
That's true, yeah.
Is there a group of legislators in Missouri that get this, that we can work with to push what needs to happen?
Well, we got 34
Anybody?
senators at least have some clue.
Who?
Well,
Anybody?
well, those 34 senators, though, they turned down they didn't want the preschool Race to the Top funding, but I didn't hear a word in 2009. So I don't know the answer to that.
Generally speaking, when you talk to them, their eyes kind of glaze over.
They don't get it.
They don't get it. Well, everybody's scared to turn down money.
And then, of course, and you're doing it for the children.
How do we access the petition on the CCSS?
We're going to, I'll
We'll
let you explain that.
have a link to it on the blog. We haven't exactly figured out the mechanics yet.
We just came, Utah, if you want to access a wonderful, those people in Utah have been fabulous, and it's called Utahns Against Common Core. And they are pounding their state school board, and that's where we got the idea of the petition, and I just came across that last week. So we'll be getting that on the website hopefully within a couple weeks.
What's the name of the group again?
Utahns, it's UTAHNS, againstcommoncore.com.
What is your website?
We have cards. It's Missouri Education Watchdog. It's Mew, which is a cat, but we're really... Yes.
Who would be establishing the Common Core standards? Or the standard is going to be standard for Missouri, different standard for different states. Each state will have their own group that will establish the standards, or will that be coming from federal for all states?
That's a great question. The standards are set by the consortia, the two main consortia that we talked about, and we're in Smarter Balance Consortia. The consortias are controlled by two private organizations. That would be your National Governors Association and your Chief Council of State School Officers. They are privately funded. So what's happening, and then the Department of Education is giving them money, so they're setting the standards for public school students. So for instance, your grandchild is in a public school in Missouri, and they're learning something that is just wrong. You know it's not right. Your local school board can't do anything about it. DESE can't do anything about it. So you have to appeal to the state of Washington, where the standards are coming out of. So what I'm telling you is, as a voter, you're paying for this, but you can't hold them accountable. It's private organizations, and what people have to understand about education reform is they're turning it into a business model. And they're saying private organizations can do so much better than a local school board or teachers. That's the shift in thinking. Now, whether you agree or not, if private organizations are better, the thing is, you don't have any voice in what they're deciding for your kids or for your grandkids.
There's no accountability.
There is no accountability.
And it's a bit of a fraud because the government entities, whichever they are, tell them what their standards are going to be, but then they say, oh, it's a private organization, we don't have any input on that.
The business model was very apparent in the No Child Left Behind, because really what it said was your child had to meet the grade level proficiency for language arts, math. And they're really taking it to the extreme in Common Core where they're doing the constant testing. The assumption is that every child progresses at exactly the same pace, and those increments are very small. I mean, 3 weeks, that every kid's going to be in the same place. Well, kids aren't uniform, commodities that you can put on a conveyor belt that way. So again, setting up for failure.
And I kind of like what I've always thought about healthcare. What did they always say about healthcare? That there were 30 million people that didn't have good healthcare. Wasn't that the figure, 30 million?
Now there's 300 million.
Yeah.
So,
That's pretty good. So the idea is, all right, so we have 30 million people, so now we have to change the entire system for the 30 million. When you think about education in the state of Missouri, there were 7% of the school districts or the school-age children or districts that were failing. 93% were doing pretty well. So what do? Because 7% are failing, now we have to change it for everybody. And that kind of gives you an idea on what the how education reform is like healthcare reform.
Okay. So drink up, because we know we've depressed the heck out of you.
We have a couple, yeah.
So what you're saying is, Common Core
It's Soviet USA.
in the local control of schools.
Yes,
Absolutely.
we have none. And you'll be able to hire your teachers and maintain physical property. That's pretty much it.
Okay. I teach high school at Hillsborough down in Jefferson County, and a couple of things that I'd like you to consider. Now, I'm learning so much. I am not a political person.
I'll take one of those
go to
cards.
school and teach math,
I'm
But
making
so
sure,
not
something-
that.
couple things that I
I'm
think
making
is
sure
important. First of
everybody's
all,
getting them.
We're not all in the union. There is the Missouri State Teachers Association. It is an association. It is only with the state. We're only involved with classroom student issues, not all the other crap that the unions do, okay? So don't assume that we're all in that group. We're not. Another thing is, nobody ever talks about the family and how when you don't have good, solid families, you don't have the support for the kids. Because Hillsborough is the county seat, we have a larger than typical normal amount of foster kids and kids with issues. And so this also plays a part. We see kids that if they didn't have to deal with all the crap at home, they would do so much better in school. Okay? So please, please, please don't take your frustration with the politics out on your school teacher, because we're doing the best we can with what we have. We are told, here it is, this is what you have, do this. And it's like every year is one more, my husband put it very well. It's like, it's just one more staple in a piece of paper. It's not a big deal, but we already have 100 staples in a piece of paper. So whatever you can do to support your kid's teacher. Now granted, I know there are some that are, kind of coasting through when they're not really involved or they're not doing all the things that they really should do for their kids. But most of us are. And most of us, it is consuming. And it is in our dreams. And it is in our heads when we're driving to school. It is in our heads when we are cooking dinner at night. It is in our heads when we're getting in the shower in the morning thinking, what do I do with Frank? Most of us we would die somehow. But we got all this other data we got to collect. So it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. And we hear in the news, those darn school teachers, they don't know what they're doing. And we're beat up day in and day out, if not from crazy parents on occasion. I'm sure no one here. Or the people in the media, it's all darn teachers, if they just knew anything. Before any of us teach, we have to take the praxis test for our subject area. And let me tell you what, the math test for high school math teachers is, well, for those of you who don't like math, is your worst nightmare. And we got to pass this thing before they let us teach your kids. So there's good stuff in there too, okay? There really is. even with all the junk we gotta deal with.
We have several friends that are teachers that we talk to all the time, and we have tremendous sympathy for the teachers because all of this is being dumped on them. You mentioned the data collection, and I have a friend who's a teacher in special ed, and again, they're at the extreme of it. She's supposed to make data observations every 6 minutes on the kids in her class. How do you do that and teach?
And it's been like that for years and years and years.
Well,
All right, well, thank you, ladies. You know, as Ann was describing the kind of funnel that this is going, you realize what's happening is that we're not making kids broader in their knowledge. We're not expanding their horizons. We're not making the world bigger and more interesting to them. We're narrowing it down to a few finite little pieces of information that they're going to learn over and over and over and over and over again until they can march as precisely as the North Korean army.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going on in education. They're not learning more, they're learning less. They're learning precisely what a few people want them to know and nothing more. Everything else is verboten. Everything else is verboten, except for a few tiny grains of information. They're not stupid. The kids, they're not trying to produce stupid kids. They're trying to produce microchips that contain very little information. But they can spit it back out on a moment's notice. Global warming.
Got Tourette's.
That was great. It's literal brainwashing.
Political Tourette's.
It's the next generation of Common Core students. It's going on in so many places. The other thing I wanted to draw attention, if you were here last month, you heard, was it last month, Ron Calzone?
Yeah.
Talking about how business, especially very large businesses, and government work together to screw over everybody else. They work very closely together, and it began, Ann's presentation began with the problem of private individuals, private companies making a heck of a lot of money by getting the government to create a protected monopoly for them. And it happens in the state, and it happens in the federal government, it happens everywhere. I'm going to prevent competition by pitching this idea. The only way we can effectively and efficiently perform this function is for you, government, to forbid anyone else from getting into my line of work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It creates undue influence by a few people. They have all the power, and as you said, not only is there no local control, there's no state control. There's actually no control at all, except for a handful of people who not only make the decisions, but also make the money. And on the right, we tend to cheer the idea of private companies making money. But we tend not to ask how they made it. It's great. Make all the money in the world. Do whatever you want with it. But don't use the government to put a gun to our heads to make us buy your stuff. Textbooks is a fantastic example. But insurance is another example. How long before you have to buy a new GM car every 3 years? At least until the loans are paid back. The direction of this is absolutely frightening, and that's why we gather here third Thursday of every month, or somewhere the third Thursday of every month. And I'm so glad that you came up from Hillsborough. Maybe you win the award for, and we don't actually have one. for the longest trip.
And so happy for the big turnout for North County. Thank you. I'm so proud.
Thank you so much, and especially to the 7 of you who aren't on the ballot on August 7th. That is. Yes, ma'am.
I have one saving grace, but it'll probably only be for a generation or two, and that's grandparents. Because interested grandparents can keep telling the kids that what they're being taught is not right, that this is the the right way. That's one of our jobs as a grandparent.
And aunts and
And, well, aunts and uncles, but I mean, the generation that did have some decent education before some of this happened.
I was blessed enough
We
that-
need to, to get involved with the
That's true.
grandkids.
I was blessed enough to grow up with a dad whose heroes were Ronald Reagan and William Buckley.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I graduated in 1983. Even before then, when I was in junior high and high school, my dad would look through my history books and my social studies books because he knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was a teenager. Oh, it's silly old dad. I didn't think anything of it, but now I know what he was looking for.
And you look for it, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So now we're down to the housekeeping. And this is the most important thing because Yacovelli's let us use this room tonight for free. They donated the space to it. It's a fantastic space. The only way we can pay them back is to visit the bar or visit the other bar and order food. So if you haven't, please do so and show your appreciation for the space. Also, we have remarkable, fabulous prizes available at the ticket. Patsy, how does this thing work? Because it involves math, and I wasn't paying attention to those.
I went to public school, so
Are you going to send out that presentation?
I went to Catholic school, but I didn't pay attention for 8 or 9 years. You fall behind.
With our raffle, it's $1 a ticket or 6 for 5. And we also we have someone who donated a necklace to the lady who came the furthest here.
And you can tell your students about it next fall. Also, just one more reminder, August 16th, Thursday, August 16th, Baldwin, Clayton and Kerrs Mill at Clayton Road is Sky Music Lounge. We'll be there at 7 o'clock. Bring friends.
We just announced if anybody's interested in this opt-out.
And if anybody's interested in the opt-out form, and this is for the data collection, correct? If you'd like to opt out of data collection in the Missouri Public Schools, the form will be available at the front table. All right. Thank you. Stay, hang out, meet each other, say hello, socialize, meet the candidates, and see us at Sky Music Lounge on August 16th. Thank you so much.